Hello, BookTube. It was a beautiful spring morning this morning, and I had errands to run, so I went out and about. And of course, my errands brought me to the Brattle Bookshop, which is a used bookstore in downtown Boston. I go to it as often as I can, uh, and I got a bunch of books that I want to show you. We'll start, they're all paperbacks except for one. And we'll start with two historical novels that I've seen out in the sale lot. The Brattle has three stories of used books just crammed on every shelf, but they also have a sale lot next door that's a sprawling space. It's the floor plan, enough space for another building. Uh, that's all bargain books. $1, $3, and $5. You can just spend forever out there. They're not organized in any way except by price, so you really have to just sort of look around to find everything. And I've seen these two out there, these first two books out there before, and I don't know, I hemmed and hawed. I just sort of didn't get them, and I know that I would have regretted that, so I got them both today. They're both historical novels by Alfred Duggan, who is completely forgotten today, but his historical fiction is really, really good. And I got two of them. I got Lord Jeffrey's Fancy. They're both in these, who is this? Phoenix books, these Phoenix paperbacks. And this is a historical novel set in the 13th century. And then I also got this, The Little Emperors, also in this Phoenix trade paperback, which is set in Rome and Britain. So I only saw these two. It very much looks to me like they were part of a set. I would love to find that whole set, but I found two, and that's enough, especially since they're two Alfred Duggan historical novels that I haven't read. So then what else do we have here? I think this is the only other piece of fiction. Oh no, there's one other piece of fiction that I'll save till the end because it was the find of the day. This is a murder mystery, and I am all about murder mysteries at all times, but especially in March with March Mystery Madness. And I've often contended that if you look hard enough in the gigantic realm of murder mystery fiction, you will find pretty much every kind of fiction and pretty much every person as a protagonist, as a potential sleuth. And this book certainly tests that. I do not know this book. It's the second in a series. I have no idea how long the series went. I've never read the first book. This is by B.B. Oak, and it is Thoreau on Wolf Hill. It is a Henry David Thoreau mystery, where Thoreau helps to solve the crime. The winter of 1847 has brought a consumption epidemic, which is devastating the village of Plumford, Massachusetts. In an atmosphere of increasing hysteria and superstition, country doctor Adam Walker and philosopher Henry David Thoreau seem to be the only voices of reason. The winter also brings two visitors to Plumford. Solomon Wiley hails from Rhode Island and offers his services as a vampire hunter, insisting that the scourge is supernatural in origin. At the same time, Adam's cousin Julia has returned home from France mysteriously without her new husband. When a former student of Thoreau's is found mutilated and drained of blood in the woods, Wiley insists that a legendary Indian vampire has arisen. That sounds like a lot of fun. I can't imagine Thoreau as a sleuth, but I'll certainly give it a try. Then I found a block of travel writing, which has to be the gods of the Brattle speaking, because Mark at Book Time with Elvis and I are about to embark on a new BookTube adventure to which you are all invited. We are creating a new BookTube event, S&M Journeys, where we are exploring the gigantic world of travel writing. All of its ages and all of its styles and temperaments. It's going to be so much fun. We're going to pick a book a month to concentrate on, and a lot of travel writing is very short, so it won't be a huge burden on your reading schedule. And we're starting off in April. I thought March was a little too crowded with BookTube events, so starting off in April with A Time of Gifts by Patrick Leigh Fermor, which even the most egotistical travel writer out there in the world would readily admit is one of the best books of that type of writing ever done. Perfectly welcome. I hope you can find a copy and join us. The Time of Gifts has been reprinted a few times. Should be possible on the secondhand market to find a cheap paperback. But it's got me thinking. I love travel writing. It's got me thinking about all the other books of travel writing that are out there. And I found 4 examples today. One is by James Lee Milne. This is Roman Mornings. which I have not read. There's a book that Milne wrote. I think this was fairly early in his career. I think it was the second or third thing that he wrote, that he published. He was an expert on architecture and on country houses and on the Johnsons of half the upper class of intellectuals and social and government circles in the England of his day. He was, as a later generation would have put it, he got around with the men of his generation, and ended up having the absolute final word on a lot of those relationships by writing and publishing the biographies of those men. But he was an expert on architecture and a long-standing voice on the English country house, which is an interest of mine. And I have not read this book. This book has a kind of companion volume that I have read, but only from a library. I've never actually owned a copy. The companion volume much later on from this was called Venetian Evenings. But this is Roman Mornings, and it marries his eloquence and his love of travel with his love of architecture, because in this book he looks at, I think, 7 key buildings in Rome, describes their history and everything that we know about their construction, and then their effects, the shadow that they cast on the rest of architecture and even civic living. Pretty sure that he says about the Pantheon that it's affected civic society, that it's not just an architectural trend. I don't think I've ever read this book. I think I may have read an excerpt from this in a book about architecture, but I was very happy to find it for $1, that's for sure. Then we have Carolyn Graff, 30 years ago or whatever, published this. This is The West Indies and the Spanish Main by no less than Anthony Trollope. I don't want to block the bean there. And this is a book that he wrote. He kept a diary of his travels. In 1858, he went from England to Jamaica and chronicled the sea voyage, and then chronicled all of the places that he went at the other end of the world, and then published it, I think, in 1860. And it did well. Trollope's name was known by then, and he is a fantastic storyteller, so it really doesn't matter what his subject is. I've never owned a copy of this book. I've only read it out of libraries. I'm not all that happy with Carolyn Graff paperbacks, but I'll definitely take it for $1. No one bothered to reset the type. No one is ever going to do a new or an annotated edition of this book. And the cover, even though this thing came out in the 1990s, well before the 21st century craze of moral censorship, the cover really gives you an idea of why it will never be reprinted. Let's see here. The text on the cover is just mind-bogglingly condescending. Celebrated travel writer Paul Theroux greatly admires this particular volume for its dialogue and description, as Trollope's observant eye is matched by an ear sensitive to the Carib rhythms of speech and dialect. The substance of Trollope's chronicle, however... Nice. You haul on somebody to write the introduction to your own work and then contradict them on the book. The substance of Trollope's chronicle, however, his praise of Jamaican women, for instance, and his discourses on every sort of man, from Haiti's imposing emperor to the laborers in the endless fields of cane, is inextricably wed to the cultural biases and assumptions of his time, which illuminate more fully many of the racial and colonial problems that have plagued our time. Unwittingly, Trollope provides us not only with a remarkable travel book, but also an important historical and cultural document. So it's good, but only unwittingly. It's only because we get to look over Trollope's shoulder at what a horrible person your grandparents were, how horrible they were. We can, you read it, but definitely hold it like that. I, in defiance, am going to read it and enjoy it. Then we have travel writing, where travel writing intersects with reportage, which it often does. They're often born from the same place and conducted in the same ways. This is James Fenton, and this is an Atlantic Monthly press. Atlantic Monthly, about 30 years ago, they did a traveler series, taller, thinner books. I think we saw Ackerley's book, Hindu Holiday, I think was part of that series. This is All the Wrong Places by James Fenton. It's subtitled Adrift in the Politics of the Pacific Rim. This is one of many such books that Fenton wrote. I wish I had them all. He's a heck of a writer. I don't know that I stand by him as a poet. He had in his heyday, I think he's still alive, but in his heyday he had quite a repute as a poet. I've never read any poetry of his that I liked, but his prose I've always liked. I love all of it. And this is James Fenton is the right man in the wrong place in dangerous times. This journalist, poet, and critic is almost always at the center of revolution. And here he's one of the last journalists in Saigon. He, let's see here, reports from war-ravaged Cambodia. There's lots and lots of stuff in here that I'm sure I haven't read before that will be really enjoyable. So that was travel writing. And then more travel writing to sort of cap off this little block of them is this old Dover paperback. Once upon a time, Dover they didn't just reprint, the Scarlet Letter. They reprinted all sorts of stuff that was really good. This is a genuine work of scholarship from, I think, the 1980s. And this is by Percy Adams, and it's called Travelers and Travel Liars from 1660 to 1800. And the starting date there lets you know who's going to have pride of place when the spotlight turns to the beginning of the book. And that will, of course, be Daniel Defoe, my very own Daniel Defoe, my boy, my guy. But this is all about not only travelers, but people who wrote travelogues, fraudulent travelogues, wrote travelogues lying about where they'd been and what they'd seen. It starts in 1660, but it could start a lot earlier than that, right? I mean, people were accusing Herodotus of doing that very thing 2,000 years ago. I don't think I've ever read this. And it's not so much a travel guide as it is a study of other travel guides, which is fine by me. I don't think that Mark and I will ever get to the meta level. I don't think we'll ever be doing any months on studies of travel writing. I think we'll stick to works of travel writing. But it's still going to be fascinating to me. And then we have, this is a great scholar, a great Irish scholar. His work is largely abstruse and pretty much, I'm sure, out of print. And that's a shame because they're really good. His books are really good. I've read I think everything that he ever published, including some incredibly obscure stuff that I just happened to have the right access to the right library at the right time. But I found a copy today, a paperback copy of the book that came the closest of his to public knowledge, to any kind of public acclaim. This is John OMeara, the great Irish scholar, John OMeara, and this is The Young Augustine. Badly sun damaged, but that's okay. This is not a keeper of a copy, although I will keep it, absolutely, because who knows when I'll ever see this again. This is his study of St. Augustine's Confessions. Really, it's a study of Augustine's Confessions, and a study of what we can figure out from there. He's a very, very good reader of Augustine. Basically, that's the thing that I got this for, is that he's a very good reader of Augustine. And I have a little shelf of Augustine-related stuff that is just slowly growing. Whether it's new, occasionally I'll get new things, one this year, one last year, but whether it's old as well, that's fantastic. And when it comes to the Brattle, you never know. Is this just part of somebody's big paperback library of this, that, and the other thing? Or is this the tip of the iceberg of some more Augustinian stuff? That would be great. A couple of older biographies of St. Augustine would be wonderful if I could encounter them. This will do just fine, though. This is not a long book, but boy, oh boy, does it have meat on its bones. That is in the Brattle books that I got today. That is right up there in the list. When I go to the Brattle, I get a stack of books. I always sort of make a mental list of what is most likely to be read quickly. What am I going to put on the shelf and get to some fine day? That sort of thing. And this Young Augustine thing is right near the top of the list. It's not at the top of the list. The top of the list is going to the find of the day, which we're almost at. But first we'll do Robin Waterfield. Robin Waterfield is a great translator, a great classical translator and historian. And this is a book on Xenophon's Retreat. Rather nice design of the cover there. For once, it's not just some boring, close-up of Trajan's column or something like that. Instead, this is the land, that a photograph of the land along the topography lines of what would have happened in Xenophon's great book. And that's all that this is. This is a history of Xenophon's expedition, a history of his great book. I don't think I've ever read this. I don't know that I was in the book reviewing trade when this came out. 2006, so right before. This came out from the Belknap Press of Harvard University Press. So I got back into the reviewing world in 2007. So this was right before then. I probably never even occurred to me to request it from the publisher. Probably they would have sent me a copy. But it never occurred to me to request it from them, and I don't know that I ever saw it at a bookstore. So this is new to me. As far as I know, I'll know in the first chapter if I've actually read it. Then we'll go with the one hardcover. I do ordinarily save the hardcover until the end, but I want to save the end for my find of the day. As dorky as it is. The hardcover is something that I have already read. I got this from the publisher. The publisher was Metropolitan Books. I got this from the publisher back when it came out, which was 2019. I read it. I recognized right away that it is an important book. I didn't like it, and I don't like its subject. I don't like its author. But I didn't keep it either. And the minute I saw this at the Brattle for $1, I thought, well, okay, you should have kept it because you're going to want to reread it. You're going to want to have it in your permanent library. This is Edward Snowden's book, Permanent Record. And this is, as you can tell from the worshipful picture on the cover, this is his entirely self-vindicating book about shooting to fame when he uncovered mass surveillance programs in the American government and was a whistleblower and fled the country and eventually ended up in Vladimir Putin's Russia. And there were a lot of knee-jerk reactions at the time, and there are still a lot of knee-jerk reactions. There's still a strong grassroots movement for some president to pardon him and allow him to come back to America. I don't foresee that ever happening unless the cultural tenor of the country changes completely. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the cultural tenor of the country is going to drift slowly but steadily further and further vicious, vindictive, fascist right, which means that no president pardoning Edward Snowden is one thing, but I could easily see Donald Trump in 2030 ordering his execution, ordering him to be extradited or sending a Black SEAL team to kill him in Russia. But in the meantime, since this book came out, a couple of things have happened. One is that he accepted Soviet citizenship, which means swearing an oath of loyalty to Russia and to Vladimir Putin. He became a Soviet citizen. He would be committing treason now if he fled to America. And another thing was that a federal court ruled that the mass surveillance programs that he reported on were illegal and are almost certainly still continuing. So, it's possible to come down on either side of this story. Was he a traitor, or was he the most valuable whistleblower of modern times? My own opinion, as soon as I saw this book, I realized my own opinion is not settled. I've read some damning accounts of what he did and some praiseworthy accounts of what he did. And I read this book, which I thought was kind of dorky self-aggrandizement. It's high time that I gave it another try. And I shouldn't get rid of it. I shouldn't have got rid of it the first time. So I will hold on to it this time. And then the find of the day. I did not know that this existed. I did not know that this existed. This is by Philip Ketchum, who I think we saw last summer in June on the Range, writing Westerns. He was a prolific Western writer. And he wrote for Argosy Story. He wrote for Argosy All Story. He wrote for Argosy Magazine, which is a pretty famous pulp magazine. They published Edgar Rice Burroughs. They published Tarzan for the first time. John Carter of Mars for the first time. A whole bunch of other writers. A whole bunch of Argosy had a very good run and was, once upon a time, enormously popular as a pulp magazine. I mean, Michael K. Vaughan could tell you more about it, but I know that it was enormously popular, hundreds of thousands of copies per issue at its peak. And lots of authors wrote for Argosy, and they often did serials. Serials were very big, where you start with, you introduce a character in a perilous situation. You say, here's a cliffhanger ending. Wait for chapter 2 in the next issue, and you just hope that your series will catch on. I've written that kind of prose from time to time myself. It's really enjoyable to do, and I guess I was just expecting that a lot of the serials in the old Argosy, unless you're Edgar Rice Burroughs or Robert E. Howard or something, I guess I was just assuming that a lot of those serials would just die. That the only place you'd ever find them would be in rotting old copies of Argosy magazine. And who knows how collectible those are? I have no idea. But apparently, somebody, who are you? Apparently, a publisher decided to collect some of the serials from Argosy magazine. And one of the ones they did was Brett Walda by Philip Ketchum, which is not a Western. This is a tale of Alfred the Great and the Vikings. So once again, every trip that I take to the Brattle has a Viking book in it. This was a serial then, in the 1930s, almost 100 years ago. Uh, Bretwalda is a weird Anglo-Saxon term that means boss or a leader or some kind or other. In this story, it refers to an axe, a legendary weapon. But this is rip snorting, old-fashioned adventure, historical fiction adventure stories, each chapter of which ends in a thrilling way because that's how this was originally published. I had no idea that some publisher went through Argosy, found all of those things, and reprinted them in one book. This is all of Bretwalda that Philip Ketchum did. Philip Ketchum was a really likable, really funny guy, didn't take himself too seriously, and wrote first-rate pulp stuff. So I was overjoyed to find this. It was definitely the find of the day, Viking-related or not. And I was a little bit stunned when I looked at the back of the book and saw that this is not the only Argosy collection that they have done. I want all of these. There's Bretwalda right down there, but this is the one I want. That is The Swordsman of Mars by Otis Aldebert Klein, who got off on a wrong foot with me with his jungle fiction last Garb August. Is this some sort of Martian fantasy? Again, Michael K. Vaughan would probably know, but I want that volume. Absolutely I do. But I will definitely take Bretwalda. In fact, the point that I was sort of thinking of when I was looking at this back page is that if I didn't know any of these things, if I didn't hold this, well, I wasn't holding this book in my hand and just saw like a website with these 10 pieces, I would almost certainly have said this is the one I wanted most. Maybe second to that, but maybe not. I would probably have picked this one first. And here it is. This is the one I found. So I'm very, very happy about that. Irrationally happy about that. And that is it. That is just a random spring day Brattle haul on the bright sunshine. So let's do a Steve pyramid here. We have Permanent Record by Edward Snowden, either a social justice hero or traitor, depending on how you look at it. We have Bretwalda, all in one volume, with, I don't know if I showed you this. This also has at least a lot of the illustrations from the pulp. Just incredible. Just an incredible find. So we have those two. Let's see who we go on here. We've got Xenophon's Retreat, classical history. We have The Young Augustine. Fantastic. John OMeara, just fantastic. Then we have some travel writing. We have Travelers and Travel Liars. We have All the Wrong Places by James Fenton, best friends with Martin Amis and Christopher Hitchens, part of that circle. We have The West Indies and the Spanish Main, which Anthony Trollope unwittingly crafted into an interesting book. We have Roman Mornings by James Lee Mill. We have Thoreau on Wolf Hill, a murder mystery starring Henry David Thoreau. And we have two Alfred Duggan historical novels. Probably I will put those aside more than some of the rest of these because they are a little bit cocked, and I will want to fix that. Before I go at them, I will want to fix that. So I'll probably put them underneath, a couple of boxes of The Tale of Genji and see if I can straighten them out a little. More than likely, the Edward Snowden and the Bretwalda will be the things that I read first from this little treasure trove. So anyway, that was a trip to the Brattle. I will wrap this up, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.